All right, we are at quorum, so we would like to get started. For the record, the time is now 2:07, and we have begun the Assembly Bill 32 Environmental Justice Advisory Committee public meeting. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jane Harrington from Leading Resources, and I am the facilitator for today's meeting. I am joined by my co-facilitator, Eric Douglas. We are excited to be with you all today. Housekeeping and logistics. Before we start with order of business, housekeeping will be covered on Zoom to facilitate the public comment period and a few critical details related to the Sacramento facility. Spanish interpretation will be provided in the Zoom Spanish channel for the duration of the meeting. We also have 2 interpreters to support today's meeting. For those in the building, restrooms are outside the door to the left and down the hall by the drinking fountains. In case of an emergency, please exit out the door to the right down the stairs. For Zoom, we will have 2 public comment periods today for agenda items 3 and 5. As a reminder, please limit your comments to those agenda items. And while EJAC welcomes your comments, committee members will not be responding to public comment. For members of the public participating remotely, you will be able to raise your hand in Zoom to speak during the public comment period. When it's your turn, the host will ask you to unmute, and after you click on the unmute button from your end, you'll be able to speak. We will be switching off between commenters in the room and on Zoom. We intend to give each commenter 3 minutes to speak, and we'll let you know if any changes are required based on the volume of comments. In the event that *6 does not work to unmute, CARB can also unmute you on this end. We appreciate you staying on mute until it's your turn to speak to be respectful of everyone's turn. Before providing your question or comment, please state your name and affiliation if applicable so that we might know who is speaking. We will do our best to do the same in the room for members of the public to know who is talking. I might gently remind folks as we move through the meeting to do that. Zoom Q&A and chat functions are turned off for participants. Now I'd like to introduce our Spanish interpreter that is on the line in the main channel. Grizel, if you could please introduce yourself and translate the information on this slide.
Yes, of course. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Grisel. I will provide now the instructions in Spanish. Hola, ¿qué tal? Buenas tardes. Yo soy Grisel, soy una de las intérpretes. Les voy a dar un poco de las instrucciones en español. Para levantar la mano, los participantes que se conectan con teléfono al Zoom pueden marcar gato 2 y de esta manera van a poder levantar la mano. Se les informará a los participantes en el teléfono cuando se les quite el sonido durante la sesión de comentarios públicos y puede marcar asterisco 6 para poder silenciar o reactivar el sonido.
Thank you. To prevent echoes, for those who are participating in person, we request that you click on the symbol next to the unmute button as seen in number 1. Next, select Leave Computer Audio as seen in number 2. Also, please make sure to stay muted for the full duration of the meeting to avoid background noise as seen in number 3.
Para los participantes en la sala, les vamos a pedir que nos ayuden a evitar ecos. Para arreglar esta situación, después de unirse a la reunión, seleccione abandonar el audio de la computadora, que se ve en el número 2, y asegúrese de silenciarse. Para poder arreglar esto también, después de haberse unido a la reunión, seleccione abandonar el audio de la computadora y puede asegurarse de que su micrófono esté silenciado, como se ve en el número 3 en la pantalla.
Thank you. Next, we will provide instructions and then we'll enable the Zoom interpretation features. When the interpretation globe appears at the bottom right corner of Zoom, as seen here in number 1, please choose your preferred language as English or Spanish, as seen in number 2. Grizel, please provide instructions in Spanish.
Sure. Para poder utilizar el servicio de interpretación al español, en los controles de la parte inferior de su pantalla va a haber un icono que aparece como un globo terráqueo, como viene en el número 1, también puede aparecer en los 3 puntos que dicen más. Después necesita hacer clic en el idioma que desea escuchar, en este caso en español, como aparece en el número 2 en la imagen.
Thank you. If for any reason you require technical Zoom support in today's meeting, please contact CARB staff Bobby Rutsch, who is in person here in Sacramento, by email as provided on this slide. Give you a moment to capture that. We will do our best to assist you. Today's meeting is being recorded. CARB staff will post to the EJAC meetings and events website in coming weeks. This is the same website where you can find all materials for today's meeting as provided on this slide. Grisel, could you please provide those instructions in Spanish?
Sure. Para soporte técnico, pida ayuda si es que tiene algún problema. Se puede comunicar al correo electrónico que aparece en pantalla y se hará el mejor esfuerzo para darle respuesta. A modo de recordatorio, la reunión se está grabando y los materiales de la reunión están disponibles en el sitio web que aparece también en pantalla en el URL. La grabación también estará disponible en el mismo sitio web aproximadamente 2 semanas después de la reunión. Gracias and thank you.
Thank you. With that, I would like to begin the EJAC member roll call. As a reminder, this is the formal record of meeting attendance, and therefore we ask that all EJAC members respond when your name is called. Please state here your affiliation, pronouns, and if you are on or off camera, and if you're off, the reason for doing so to be consistent with our meeting requirements. For EJAC members who join the meeting later, we will be asking for them to verbally announce their attendance in the same fashion so it is clear to all participants. So to begin, Martha Dina Arguello. You might be on mute.
Yeah, Marta Dina Arguello with Physicians for Social Responsibility, she, her pronouns, and my camera is on and it'll go on and off. I have to keep getting up and up just because of comfort. So I may turn it off to move and I'll let you know.
Thank you. Juan Flores. Dr. Catherine Garupa.
Good afternoon. I'm here in person. This is Dr. Catherine Garupa with the Central Valley Air Quality Coalition, or CVAC, they and she pronouns.
Kevin Hamilton.
Kevin Hamilton, Central California Asthma Collaborative. I'm here in person. He, him, my pronouns.
John Harriel Jr. Thomas Helm.
Present in person.
Matt Holmes. Kevin Jefferson III.
Hello. Nice to see you all. I'm on Zoom.
Thank you. Ray Leon.
Presente. In person.
Luis Almedo. Jill Sherman Warren. That concludes roll call. We have 7 in attendance, 4 absent. Thank you. Now I'll turn it over to our co-chairs to go over today's agenda.
Thank you. This is Dr. Catherine again. We'll start as usual with introductions and opening remarks from CARB staff and co-chairs. Then we'll get an informational update on the EJAC charter from CARB staff. We'll take the opportunity to do public comment. Then we will have discussion among the committee to prepare for our September 12th joint meeting with the Air Resources Board. We'll take a break, another round of public comment, and then next steps and closing remarks. Over to Martha Dina for our EJAC meeting agreements.
Yes, thank you, Catherine. So as usual, these are our internal meeting agreements. Pay attention to equity of airtime, be present, be open and flexible in our approaches, be realistic and monitor our ability to get through the full agenda, seek out synergies in our work, use yes and building upon each other. If virtual, keep your camera on throughout the duration of the meeting. State if you're going on off camera and why. If leaving the meeting, please notify staff and co-chairs so that we can keep quorum. listen and be compassionate and supportive, reach for and invite inspiration and intuition, look for ways to move toward action where possible, respect and trust the respect the agenda and trust the process, and share responsibility for our success.
Thank you. I will now turn it over to Chanel for an introduction.
Thanks, Jane, so much. I just want to say a couple of brief remarks. So I just wanted to welcome everyone. I think as many already know, my name is Chanel Fletcher. I'm the Deputy Executive Officer of Equity, Communities, and Environmental Justice. Want to give a huge thanks to public, CARB deputies, and the chair's office. For those that are here with us today, today's discussion includes two main items, including an informal update from CARB staff on the EJAC charter revision process, and then the EJAC preparation for the upcoming September 12th EJAC CARB joint board meeting. So CARB staff will provide an overview of the revision process for the charter and our 2023 directive from the board where the charter was adopted. We are looking forward to hearing from the EJAC members as they finalize presentations from the joint board meeting and issues they intend to raise. I think we all want to go in prepared to allow for a more fruitful discussion and dialogue in the short joint meeting shared space. It'll really be a good time for us to think about the progress for the ongoing EJAC plans, resolutions, and areas to focus in the months ahead. I also want to acknowledge that I know that Matt Holmes, while he wasn't able to speak, he is on by phone. So just wanted to acknowledge that as well. And that we will keep working with you, Matt, to figure out some of the technical issues there. With that said, I will turn it over to our EJAC co-chairs to provide their opening remarks and kick us off for today's discussion. Catherine, I'll turn it over to you.
Kevin or Martha Dina, did you want to go first?
Nope.
Okay, I just have a few quick things and then I'll check in again. First, just wanted to acknowledge and appreciate Kevin Jefferson, Kevin Hamilton, and Martha Dina for participating in a sub-quorum discussion this morning to give us a little bit of an opportunity to reflect on our first year as a permanent committee and where we go from here. And I'm going to steal from Kevin Hamilton the idea that we really need to actually formally celebrate that we've existed as a committee for a year and how much we've accomplished. I also wanted to acknowledge that Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability, who has been leading a lot of the organizing work around the low carbon fuel standard, recognized myself and Martha Dina the other night at an award ceremony for our contributions to the conversation around the low carbon fuel standard. And that was both incredibly validating in showing the significance of our work and also, again, another important opportunity to reflect and be proud of all that we've accomplished. I was sharing with the group that I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So, as somebody who has been tasked with leading forward work around huge issues like low carbon fuel standard and carbon capture, I always stress about whether we're doing the best that we can. But it's important to recognize how far we've come and how much we've done. And also that we're standing on the shoulders of giants. The LCFS work wouldn't have happened without groups like Leadership Council and the coalition that they coordinate. So as much as they gave an award to us, I also want to recognize and honor their work. And what I shared when I accepted the award is that we've gotten feedback as a committee that we've done important work to move the needle on these conversations. And I know that it's sometimes progress is slow, but ultimately my aim is for us to actually change the gauge. And then at some point, change what we're measuring and why it matters to make sure that equity is really centered in decision-making at CARB. So we definitely have some important agenda items today. Looking forward to making some comments and having some substantive discussions under those. And with that, I'll see if Kevin or Martha Dina want to share anything before we jump into our next item.
No, I'm really glad, I think we have, as we prepare for the September meeting, really hope for my hope for all the members of the committee is to really, think about how we go about doing this culture shift. What is the work, it's sometimes challenging for us to plan because of open meeting laws. And so, which are very important. And so this is our one opportunity before that meeting to really flush out what message we want to take to the board, and for us to also think how are the other ways that we're going to measure success of this committee. And I think those are things that both CARB and the board and us have very much in front of mind. And I want us to make sure that we think about that and that we're thoughtful, and that for all of the committee members, let's think about what is it that we need to get to that meeting well prepared. To me, that's the most important thing, to show up prepared, do right by the communities that we represent, and hopefully, begin to move move toward that culture shift that we need to actually accomplish environmental justice. And with that, I'll stop.
I would just like to publicly say thank you to Dr. Catherine and Miss Martha for your tremendous work, your tenacity, your steadfastness. More importantly, you guys have been trailblazers in this work, but more importantly, you are continuing to be around. You're looking to the future. You're talking strategy and how to fight this fight. So I commend you for your tremendous work. Also to the team, it's a year. We're a year into this. It's tough. It's been tough, but we're sticking it out. So props to the team, props to the work. Let's keep pushing.
All right, thank you. Now we'll move to our first informational item on the agenda. For those following on the agenda, that is item number 3, the CARB informational update on the EJAC charter. I will turn it over to Karina, CARB staff.
Thank you, Jane, and good afternoon, everyone. This is Karina, EJAC lead from CARB. We wanted to provide a brief informational overview of the EJAC charter revision and where it currently is in progress. The purpose of this informational update is to provide background and context for board directives on the charter, discuss CARB priorities, limitations, and parameters for charter revisions, an update on the revisions process, and discuss a path forward. The EJAC charter was adopted by the board in March 2023 at the same time as approval of the ongoing AB 32 EJAC. The charter is the foundation for ongoing EJAC work in advising the board on AB 32 related programs. In March 2023, the board directed staff and EJAC to revisit the charter after 18 months and make required revisions based on lessons learned. The board directive was a one-time revision process. Given the work already done on the charter when ongoing EJAC was formed, CARB envisions minor changes to clarify language and improve overall accountability in meeting intended goals. CARB has begun the process of reviewing the charter language per board direction. A subquorum of EJAC members, CARB, and the third-party contractor for technical writing and facilitation have had informal discussion on potential revisions. CARB documented key takeaways and desired changes to allow for future discussion and collaboration with EJAC. The charter revision priorities include clarifying language for membership and attendance, providing consideration for time and workload of co-chairs, including language to allow for a more even distribution of EJAC workload, clarifying expectations for EJAC public and joint meetings, and providing specific language and links on relevant statutes, including Senate Bill 544 and Government Code 87104. The goal is for charter revisions that support our work together with EJAC and allow for progress to be made. Revisions must consider EJAC and CARB staff time and our ability to come to EJAC joint and public meetings prepared. The charter includes statutory language with laws and rules related to Assembly Bill 32, the Health and Safety Code, and the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act that can't change in charter revision. Statutory language in the following charter sections cannot be changed. Sections 3 on definitions, 4 on disclaimers, 5 on AB 32 statutory language, 6 on the EJAC mission statement, and 7 on EJAC goals. Section 9 on membership, which references the Health and Safety Code. Section 8 on EJAC meetings, 10 on roles and responsibilities, and 11 on decision-making, which references the Bagley-Keene Act. Section 11C on defining the legal relationship, and Section 11C, which explains the legal relationship between EJAC and the board. Section 12 on transparency requirements, and Section 13 on records, since they draw from state statute. So moving forward, the September 12th joint EJAC CARB board meeting will include a charter revision overview, much like this one, on background and next steps. A future EJAC public meeting would focus on CARB and EJAC priorities and proposed language changes for charter revisions. CARB staff aim for the charter revision to be completed as soon as possible within the next few months. Thank you, and now I'll turn it back to Jane to open up our first public comment period.
We will now open up public comment. We ask that everyone who is interested in speaking in Zoom, please raise your hand and we will call on you accordingly. We will allow 3 minutes for each commenter at this time and let you know if we need to adjust based on the number of comments. Please state your name and affiliation before you provide your question or comment. Looking to the room to see if we have any in-person commenters. Seeing none at this time, we will look to Zoom, see if we have any hands raised. Mike, I see that your hand is raised. Please unmute on your end and go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My name is Mike Bullock. I live in Oceanside, and speaking for myself, I'm on some committees and I'm active in the Democratic Party and those kind of things. But my focus is climate literacy and transportation policy. In terms of the charter, what I think is needed is that the EJAC's enormous stake in overall success needs to be reflected in the charter, because I don't hear the meetings give any time to explaining to the general public, or it's not clear to me that the members of the EJAC even understand the overarching issue here, and that is human survival. It is avoiding climate destabilization. And I was made aware of this in a historic letter of 2011 by the Attorney General of the state of California, Kamala Harris. And she was bold, and she did what her predecessor, Jerry Brown, would not do. And she threatened to sue Sandag over their regional transportation plan. And one of the things she said is that, just paraphrasing here, that the CARB scoping plan is about climate stabilization. Therefore, it is the objective of CEQA. Now, that may sound like an exaggeration, and she would love it if anybody would have challenged her on that. She's very smart and she is fearless, and she incurred the wrath of Sandag, as she knew she would. And that's why her predecessor, Jerry Brown, didn't do what she did. But she didn't just write a threatening letter. She joined the Cleveland National Forest Foundation's lawsuit. So that was the state of California, joined a bunch of nobodies really filed that suit, and she got a lot of very strong rulings. So that's important background, and that is explains what we're really here for. It's about human survival. And the Secretary General of the UN said that we're dangerously close to the point of no return. He said we're solidly on a path to an unlivable planet. No exaggeration there, unlivable planet. We will destroy our habitat and we will starve to death. And I'm not talking about millions of people starving. I'm talking about billions of people to extinction. So this committee has a stake in that overall success, and I want to see that reflected. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking back to the room, seeing no one in the room for public comment, looking online. I'll give you a moment. If you'd like to make comment, please raise your hand. Seeing no hands raised, that concludes public comment on this item. We will now move.
So, sorry to interject. This is Dr. Catherine. I did have one clarifying question, and that I had before, so totally unrelated to the public commenter. But appreciate the slide on statutory limitations. I had asked during one of our prep meetings, can we just kind of get an overview of what we can actually do in the charter revisions? So a lot of these make sense to me in terms of the way they're explained, but I was curious about 7 EJAC goals. Why would that be something that we couldn't update if we felt like there was something missing there?
This is Ashley from CARB. That was just to specifically call out any statutory references within that related to AB 32 and the charge for AB 32.
Got it. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure I'm clear on our parameters of what we can update.
All right, we will now move to our next agenda item. For those following along, it's agenda item number 5, the EJAC discussion to prepare for the September 12th, 2024 joint EJAC CARB board meeting. We'll turn it over to our co-chairs for that.
Thank you, Jane. This is Dr. Catherine again. I have a few quick updates that I wanted to share just to kind of frame this conversation. I'll call committee members' attention to the sub-bullets for this item. So our goal is to prepare for the September 12th meeting, and we have several items to discuss. Under carbon markets, we'll be looking at the low carbon fuel standard and the cap and trade program. And today we also have on our agenda to review and hopefully finalize our carbon capture resolution. So wanted to make sure that everyone on the committee is aware that on August 22nd, that's I think next Thursday, the Air Resources Board is having a workshop in Fresno around emissions from dairies. So people that are tracking that issue, I want to make sure that folks are aware that that workshop is coming up. In case you haven't seen, and it was included in our packet for today, the 15-day changes for the low carbon fuel standard have also come out. Please don't ask me for my feedback on them because I've not had time to read through them yet. They came out just a few days ago and we've had a very busy week at CVAC. But I wanted to make sure that people knew, and our work group, the carbon markets work group, will meet between now and September 12th. So a lot of the prep around the conversation of what is still pending with the low carbon fuel standard, of course, very open to the conversation today, and also want to make explicit if people want to get more engaged to please join the work group conversation to prep for that. And then also under carbon markets, you all know is the cap and trade program. So I wanted to update the committee that our work group has been drafting resolution language and did not feel, given the amount of detail to that plan or program and how many other things we had on our agenda, we decided not to bring it forward for the committee to review today to give ourselves more time to discuss internally, to review proposed changes. So a resolution on cap and trade is still in the works, but it will not be done by September 12th. So that is not the focus of what we'll discuss at the board. And then my last update in being transparent and reporting back to the group is that the carbon markets work group was also reached out to by the Independent Emissions Market Advisory Committee, or the IEMAC, that I think many, if not all of us, are familiar with by now. They're the Cali PA committee that specifically looks at the program design for the cap and trade program. And they had a discussion specifically about carbon capture technologies and what that means for carbon markets. Our work group didn't have anyone who was available to join the discussion. And so Katie Valenzuela, CVAC's senior policy advocate who works with us very closely, volunteered to represent us at that committee meeting. I think that was actually just last week, but there was a lot of rich discussion about the implications of crediting carbon capture projects, and some of the risks and harms of doing that Katie has agreed to help work with me to prepare a memo so that we can report back to the EJAC what was discussed with the Independent Emissions Market Advisory Committee and what are some of the concerns around crediting carbon capture projects within carbon markets. So look out for that from myself and Katie in the next few weeks. Those are my quick updates on low carbon fuel standard and cap and trade. And again, just naming, we do have the carbon capture resolution to get to, but I think maybe first process-wise, we just pause to see if anybody has questions or suggestions now on carbon markets. And Martha Dina and Kevin Jefferson, I'll look to you two first. Is there anything that you would like to add in terms of updates on those items?
No, I'm looking forward to the memo. And yeah, I think that's my only comment.
I don't have anything to add.
Great, thank you both. So at this point, I think we'll open it up to the committee. For those of you in the room, if you have anything you'd like to say, if you can help indicate by putting your tent card up. And if you're on Zoom, if you want to raise your hand. If you have any thoughts or questions about how we approach the carbon markets agenda items for September 12th, or of course, any comments or questions about the updates that I shared.
All right, now for discussion of the committee as requested. If you'd like to speak, please put your name card up and please make sure you introduce yourself before you start speaking. I see Kevin. Go ahead.
Kevin Hamilton, Central California Asthma Collaborative. Thanks, Catherine, for that synopsis. That was very good. Just going back to the comments you made on the charter and sort of when the more formal conversations will be happening that more of us can participate in is what I'm really looking for more information on. Is there anything that CARB staff can update us? Plan a formal process for that.
This is Ashley from CARB, just to start, and Chanel can add in if there's anything I'm missing. But I think the most essential thing first is to meet again with the subgroup and then plan to meet again with the whole committee at some point soon over the next couple of months. So that's the plan currently. But just to mention that that's not going to be the focus of the joint discussion this time around. So that will be through the normal public process.
Right. I didn't think it was going to be the focus of this meeting coming up with the joint meeting. But I'm thinking more about timeline. Do you have a timeline for this at this point? Like, I want to get it done by, we need to have it done by this date? Is there, because it's not really in statute that we need to do this. This is more, right?
Thanks, Kevin. Ashley, again at CARB, we're working through that currently and want to make sure that we work with EJAC members to figure out that timeline. Yep.
All right, then. Thank you.
Yep.
Other committee members for discussion on this item?
Well, I guess my question is, we know what topics we want to bring up. I'm wondering how we use that time the most productive, and how much time do we want to spend on the charter versus how much do we want to spend on whether it's the low carbon fuel standard or the cap and trade program or are there the three main topics that we've discussed here, right? The carbon markets, low carbon fuel standard, and the use the reliance on some of the tech solutions for compliance. Those seem to me the relevant ones in terms of what's moving quickly. And so I want us to have some agreement about the topics that we want to raise, and then what do are there materials that we want to present similar to what we did at the end of during the scoping plan process, so that we can start preparing those.
Thank you, Martha Dina. This is Jane Harrington, the facilitator. So what I hear is a request for a discussion from the committee to identify and clarify the topics that you want to discuss at the joint meeting, and the time spent on those, any materials that might be needed. I heard charter, LCFS, and CCUS.
Yes.
This is Dr. Catherine. I agree with what you're saying, Martha Dina, in terms of that we need to be very conscientious about the distribution of time. And this also gets to your question, Kevin, also about charter updates. My feedback to staff as a co-chair has been, can we please dive into the charter after the September 12th joint meeting? Because we've just got so many other things moving. And this was really our first opportunity as an entire committee to hear what the expectations are for the charter. So I would hope during the joint meeting where we have limited time that the charter piece again, is very short. This was something that the chair committed to when we became a permanent committee, that we would start with a charter and that after a year and a half, we would revisit it. So I appreciate the flexibility on CARBs and that they're willing to work with us in terms of how quickly we get to that, because obviously we have lots of different things that we're juggling. And just in case it wasn't clear in my overview, because CARB staff have to prepare in advance and prepare board members, we've already been asked what are we proposing as the agenda items. So I just want to be clear, we have really limited time and want to have clear boundaries that we can't expand a whole lot. So what we've already agreed to is carbon markets with 2 sub items. One is low carbon fuel standard, one is cap and trade. As the coordinator of that work group, again, I invite members who want to participate in the conversation, happy to distribute that workload. I think that they'll be relatively high level because for low carbon fuel standard, we already passed a resolution. And for cap and trade, we don't have a resolution. So those are mostly continuations of big picture conversations. Carbon capture is our second main agenda item, and we do actually have a resolution that hopefully we're passing today. And so personally, I would imagine that that's a place where we probably want to spend a little bit more time because there we do actually have specific policy asks that we're making of the board. That's my initial take in terms of where we land on core items and kind of how we distribute the topics. And I think now or at the next work group meeting, I would also really be looking to committee members to volunteer. You know, I would like to speak on this item, or I would like to pick up this piece of the carbon capture resolution and give the explanation as to why we felt like that was really important. And I think we might have implicitly agreed to this at the last meeting, Martha Dina, but maybe it'll help make it explicit since I'm convening the carbon markets work group to figure out LCFS and cap and trade. Maybe if you're willing, because you put in so much work on the front end to developing the carbon capture resolution, if you'd be willing to coordinate who the speakers are around that item.
Okay. Yes, I would.
And I see committee members, committee member Matt Holmes' hand raised. Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to respectfully request to be involved in carbon capture conversations and to volunteer to help carry that item. Was that clear?
Thank you, Matt. Yes. Perfect. Yes. Thank you for the volunteer on that. Additional discussion from the committee.
Well, I would just continue that I'm grateful to the chairs for all of their monumental work. All the Venezuela, and I would also eagerly support future meetings with the IEMAC. I know it's high level, but I think I can wrap my head around it. So available if there's more working people. I'm pretty sure there is.
Matt, you're breaking up. I'm having trouble understanding what you're saying. What I heard was you think more meetings with the IEMAC, and then it kind of cut out.
I mean, I would be eager to support those meetings, and that I think a member of this advisory committee should be participating in those meetings, despite my infinite confidence in Katie Valenzuela.
Yeah, so to be clear, I also was there and participated in the meeting and prepped with Katie, so we did have an EJAC member representative. She just took on the presentation aspect of it.
Appreciate it.
So definitely open to other volunteers or feedback on agenda items. I do also want to make sure that people are aware that we have a draft carbon capture resolution with some proposed changes highlighted in yellow that is also an action item today. So we are going to want to vote on that. So I want to make sure people have enough time to look on that and give feedback as well.
The item, this is Jane, the facilitator, the item that Dr. Catherine just referred to is posted on the website for those attending virtually, and for those in the room, copies have been provided. The yellow highlight indicates language that EJAC added after the last public meeting. We'll give everybody a moment.
Yeah, I was just also going to offer a very brief explanation that most of what is highlighted were things that we discussed the last committee meeting where we reviewed the language and we named things like we actually need to define carbon dioxide removal, engineered carbon capture, use and storage, direct air capture. So a good section of it is technical clarifications. And then there are a few pieces that again came out of what some of our presenters were talking about. So the piece about it presenting a moral hazard and risk public trust if we impose dangerous and experimental projects that perpetuate business as usual is the last one that's added. So just want to acknowledge the first few are more technical, then the next few are really trying to integrate what we heard from our guest speakers last time. I do have also 2 other quick edits, so I just want to make sure we're reviewing on the same page. There was a recommended change on page 3 of the resolution. It was an existing bullet point that starts mandating notification and community engagement processes for residents and schools. The suggestion is to modify that so that it says mandating notification and community engagement processes for residents and sensitive sites such as schools, to make sure that we're not limiting ourselves just to schools, but any sensitive site that would need to be a part of the notification process. Then I am also going to call out my own typo and again ask for a little bit of grace because it was a crazy week and I was pulling this language together just yesterday. So the
God,
whereas
Catherine, a typo.
Yes, I know. It's the perfectionist in me. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, whereas the IPCC considers engineered CCUS a very expensive technology. Right now it says the International Panel on Climate Change, and it should just be changed to intergovernmental.
Let's pause just for a moment on this item, give everybody a chance to read through and get some discussion from the committee. We'll take a moment. All right, thank you to the committee for taking some time to review that. Any discussion at this point? So we'll give it another moment. I do understand we want to take action on this item today. So thank you. Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I was trying to scan for some clear language around the, the fact that industrial technology is based on a historic overuse of disadvantaged communities and geographies. There's scrolling right there. I feel like the whole DAC world is sort of clueless that building something instead of building something we want is a cost, and I think there may be a way for us to be more explicit. Unless I'm missing it, somebody can school me. But if we can be more explicit about the fact that throwing a lifeline to any industry is throwing a lifeline to an industry that's already overburdened communities, and so that there's an inherent cost accumulation in using an engineered strategy versus a restorative or reparatory strategy like a conservation strategy or a natural removal strategy. So imposing, I guess it says that perpetuates business as usual, doesn't explicitly talk about the California statutory violations of civil rights. Perpetuates business as usual. I feel like a lot's contained in there that's actually legally actionable. Is anybody with me on this, or am I barking up my own as yet unengaged civil rights tree?
Thank you, Matt. I hear an invitation for discussion on that. Any committee members?
Well, I think I get what you're saying, but could you propose language then? And
Yeah, recognizing that perpetuating the business as usual model is to extend, increase, and perpetuate pollution burdens in overburdened communities is a violation of California government code. And we can quote the code if we need to. Everybody's tired of hearing.
someone capturing that?
I mean, it's not about my feelings, right? Like literally, we have a very selective government when it comes to pursuing its own statutory obligations.
Thank you, Matt, for the suggested revision. We've got some people typing, trying to capture that down. I might invite you, I apologize for this, I might invite you to say it one more time, or if it's easier for you to type it in the chat.
I'll put some in the chat.
Thank you so much. While Matt is preparing that language, any other comments on the resolution? Kevin, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it pretty much plays as is. Every time I read it, I mean, I'm fine with Matt's addition to that modification. We spent a lot of time on this, and I think it reads well. It states what EJAC's demands are, if you will. I'll just say it that way, like that. And I think we need to move this thing forward. What do my colleagues think about that?
Sorry, this is Dr. Oh, go ahead, Luis.
I was going to say, Luis, what do you think?
Yeah, just a very quick observation and comment here on the groundwater and drinking water. There are more supplies of water, and I think those are very specific. I'm thinking about agricultural water. I mean, in rural communities, while there's still, but I believe not a equitable, fair distribution of water, and there from the agriculture, why I believe that they protect and defend the rights to that water, and that it is not equitably being distributed or fairly being distributed for other uses for the community that serves the agriculture industry. I also find it important to protect that water because it is being threatened. It is being exported outside of these agriculture areas, killing jobs. And there are other industries that are stepping in, competing for those waters. So again, another water source that isn't always, doesn't fall into the drinking water. So I don't know if any of you have in California or other parts of the country where, in this case, let's focus on California, the water that enters the Imperial Valley, where I live, is agricultural water. It doesn't become drinking water or potable water until it's bought and treated by a centralized water system like a city or private operators. So I did want to draw that distinction, and but also want to be sensitive to other thoughts about whether that's a concern or not. I'd love to hear them, but I wanted to add that additional characterization.
Thanks, Luis. It took me a second to find where you were at. So just for people who might be looking for it, on page 2 at the bottom, under the be it further resolved that EJAC advocates for the adoption of common sense policy protections. The second bullet point, I believe that's where you're at, right, Luis, where it says.
Apologize, I didn't point it out. It's
yeah. So
yes, second bullet point under, yeah.
Could we just change it to say threaten water supplies instead of specifying groundwater and drinking water, and just keep it general?
I would hate to take away the attention from drinking water.
Okay, so you're proposing to add what then? Agricultural water also?
Can I make a suggestion?
Yep, go ahead, Kevin.
How about if we just struck the words within designated community radii? I just realized, I didn't even notice that before, but that's ridiculous. So why are we even putting that there? Just period. Projects cannot proceed if they threaten groundwater, drinking water supplies, or increase water, soil, or air pollution.
Yep.
Period.
I would be fine with that modification. I don't know that that addresses Luis's
Okay,
concern
I
or
mean, it
question
just seems
about
like it takes in
making sure
everything.
that there are other types of water. So if it's specifically water that's designated for agricultural use, would it be included in this? Is what I'm hearing you ask. Is that right?
It could be just displacement of water, not just drinking water, but displacement of water.
Yeah.
But
I don't want to overcomplicate it because then it just unravels.
Yeah, well, and so
lot.
that's why I'm saying, can we just take out the words groundwater and drinking water? Or do you want to leave them and add and other?
Well, I think it's
Water
important
uses.
to add drinking water because there's protections for drinking water. There's just different levels of protections for the different waters. And I don't want to diminish the value of that. I just said, just maybe an additional, just all water sources in which communities depend on for.
how would it not be all water? I mean, if you have to throw a comma after supplies,
I might have a solution.
that creates a break there. Yeah, let the attorney speak.
What do you got? I'm not.
Oh,
Kevin's been thinking I'm an
whatever.
attorney for like the last 2 years.
More
I
more
appreciate the
law
comment.
and knowledge than I have. Well, we have an attorney here.
As far as I know,
Got a different
agricultural
office.
water comes from groundwater and surface water. What if we added the word surface? So groundwater, surface water, and drinking water.
I still
Okay.
think we need to get rid of within the community.
I was
radii.
just going to say, so the proposal is to add the word surface before water and also delete within designated community radii.
I almost don't want to ask, but I'm curious, what was considered a designated community?
That's why I don't want to play with it because I don't want to
Yeah.
know.
Let's just take it out. Let's just take it out then.
I don't even care.
If I may, that may have been Mikey in my office, who's often very technical about water stuff. And also because we've been looking at, I think it was this like there's groundwater, there's water rights, there's a whole bunch of different things that go in there, and so yeah, I'm okay taking that part out.
I think this is Matt. I think narrowing the distinctions is important. I think those are the distinctions and the silos that extractive systems rely on to divide
Right.
these issues.
Yeah.
Would it?
So
be
we're
of
okay
val-
with removing that, right?
Yeah, just to be clear, is anybody opposing the two changes that I just summarized? No. Okay. So now additional comments and feedback. Go ahead, Luis.
I was just gonna add another, go ahead.
Sorry, Martha Dina, go ahead.
Yeah, I just remembered why. So one of the challenges that we've often had, and this may be not that relevant, but I will name it, is, for example, in the adaptive management plan. Well, is the increase due to the increase due to the trading, or is it not? Is the increase due to carbon capture or not, right? And so I don't know if that's the reason to put that in. Because what we end up getting at the regulatory level is this parsing out of, well, I'm not responsible for that, right? So I'm not going to be held accountable to that increase in groundwater contamination or a decrease in available ag water. So I don't know if that matters, and I'm not a lawyer.
Well, the question is the definition of community. What I'm hearing you say and explain, and that your staff was thinking, is that in the permitting process that, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I heard, what I translated in my brain, is that community in that respect is on a permit, and that designated community radii is somehow the space around where this activity is going to take place versus the community that it's taking places in. So that's a very technical definition. And the question that I'd have, is that needed in this circumstance, or can we just cover everything, including that, and eliminate it? So if we need to table this to find that out, it is a really important piece, then I guess that's what we do. But Stephen, could you tell us by any chance? I know this is not your thing, but we do have an attorney in the room who works in this arena. Would you happen to know?
That is?
The definition of community with respect to that comment.
I don't know what.
Stephen, use the microphone.
Yeah.
You got to turn it on too, brother.
I'm guessing that maybe that's referring to 617 communities. Is that why that language was put in there? I don't know where it came from.
So from the point of view of a permit, that would not be, for a CCUS project, that would not seem to be relevant.
I mean, I don't know enough about why it was put
Okay,
in there.
I don't want to
really
put you in a
comment.
corner
Yeah.
on that.
I'm going to go back in the document and see if I can figure out where it came from and if that can help me
Great.
figure it out. But I have a feeling for our resolution that it may not matter. But I don't know.
Because that in itself is something that I think somebody who wanted to permit this could do. If it's generally community, they could say, I'm out here in the desert. There's no community anywhere near me here. Now there's water under here, but hey, no one's using it. Not that everybody's not using every drop of water in California somewhere. And we don't have, like up north, you got the water rights situation, but we don't have that so much down here. California has most of the water rights in the state, other than those, 1917 and older kind of things. But
then there's the
19 which? 14, excuse me. Thank you. Not a lawyer, but at least I know about it.
but there's tribal folks who do have water rights.
And tribal folks who have water rights. Exactly. So those two groups, but more generally, again, it just feels like it opens a door. It leaves a crack there. And just like to know. Yeah.
If we need another reason, so I agree, but if we need another reason, especially since we just added surface water, I mean, surface water could be a river, which is going to flow outside of I didn't even know this was a word, radii, plural of radiuses.
Would it be possible to say inclusive of instead of within?
I'm going to add something a little bit different here. that may apply to this, may apply at some other area of the resolution, but historically, there has been a lot more representation for habitat and wildlife, very well invested. I mean, I've had people say, if you want to clean up a dirty river, throw a dolphin in it, and everybody will show up and clean it. So I think that maybe we should start getting in the habit of adding language such as to assure that threatened or endangered ecosystems that include habitat, wildlife, and humans, especially environmental justice communities, do no harm, right? In whichever order, you know, but just wanted to put it out there. If there's liking of it, interest in it, you don't have to agree or settle with it today, but I just wanted to put it out there for you to think about that.
So to clarify, Luis, you're proposing adding language about protecting the environment?
Protecting endangered ecosystems that include wildlife, habitat, and vulnerable at-risk populations, you know. And I know there's so many ways to describe that. I mean, we call it EJ, we call it disadvantaged community. Yeah, and I didn't want to eat up too much time thinking about it, but I think it'd be worth thinking about it, how we introduce that into a resolution such as this, because these projects can have benefits, but they can also do enormous harm. And we're just not living at a time where we have the surplus resources that we had at one point, right? Like water is a major depleting resource. It's somewhere out there in the atmosphere, right? Or in our ecosystem, but it's depleting in availability. It's depleting because of toxicity, because, you know, we have increased growth and there's a lot of interest in replacing and displacing water. So, but anyway, not limited to water. I just thought I'd bring that up because it does, I think, have a role when it comes to permits, when it comes to CEQA. You know, when you start thinking about that, I think we need to make sure that we, like I said, habitat and wildlife, those things are taken care of. Endangered species, it's humans that have never had the same level of protections unless you can afford it, right? So I would love to see something like that end up in documents like these.
Okay. This is Dr. Catherine again. I want to just make a few points of clarification. One is I just want to name the work group went through a very similar process where it's a difficult balance to strike because this is such a complex topic and there are so many different applications of carbon capture. What we're
Okay. Hi, everyone. I heard that the audio was kind of broken up there, but just to reiterate, the meeting is going to be postponed because the power is not going to come back until 4:30 in the building. So we will reschedule for a different time in the near future. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day.